Ah, yes, Pokémon Ruby and Sapphire, a set of games that seem to embody the term nostalgia, and for good reason, these being the 5th mainline Pokémon games which brought about a massive wave of change for the series as a whole. Now, in general, I've always seen these games get positive reception across the board, unless it's a troll meme to farm Twitter replies. Hell, I've even been on record for saying it was better than the game's remakes, and while I may have been arguing a little in bad faith, it helped me realize something, and that's the fact that nostalgia is an extremely valuable asset for these games. So today we'll be taking a dive into Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire just to see how good these games really were, while eliminating what nostalgia bias may exist. The timestamps are on screen, and with that, let's begin this dive into a world of too much water. Up first, let's talk about the Hoenn region, which, to put it lightly, is certainly a massive upgrade compared to the two regions we've had prior, featuring stuff like actual terrain and scenery. Yes, they actually have these here instead of infinite flat grasslands. In fact, new inventions like deserts, mountains, and seafloors also now exist that never did before, and it's actually incredibly hype. Speaking of hype, weather actually finds itself being an active part of various locations of the region, making those areas have a better dynamic gameplay-wise, but also making them just more rememberable in general. Hell, even some of the towns are unique, like a town that's full of tree houses, one sitting atop the ocean, or one that's only accessible via dive or fly, truly allowing for the game to take its story approach of nature and then applying it to the world around it as well. But adding to the cake, there's two entire towns that in theory are completely optional during the main story, and not mandatory to visit, again, in theory. Now, the region itself is divided into two parts, just from its layout alone, early and late games, being gyms 1 through 5 and 6 through 8, separated by a single surf spot. Speaking of surf, how are the HMs? Well, cut isn't mandatory, so it's instantly not the worst, although a grand total of 5 HMs are required to beat the game, being Rock Smash, Strength, Surf, Dive, and Waterfall, but thankfully this bad boy can fit them all. Okay, well there's actually 11 that can, but that's besides the point. The problem is HMs are still a mess and do influence team building quite a bit, but overall the region of Hoenn is very good from start to finish, as there's a lot to explore with plenty of incentives for doing so, like some legendary Pokemon that involve going on a lengthy fetch quest with some bizarre requirements. However, the game's progression has a few things holding it back, the gym badges being the notable examples. As to battle the 5th gym, you're required to get the first 4 badges. However, the 2nd gym can easily be skipped here, but if you do, you're still required to come back for it after beating gym 3 or 4, which is very lame, but it doesn't end here, as gym 6 can be skipped, but it's still forced on you if you reach the Pokemon League, as an actual badge check will happen, rather than the game assuming you have them all. Yes, I skipped out on Fly for the entire game to get this piece of video. It sucked so much. Again, this is small stuff, and if I wanted to speak on something genuinely problematic, it's the fact that you can just be locked out of getting the Master Ball. Yep, after a certain point in the game, Evil Team Hideout just gets blocked off, and all your hopes and dreams shatter like the Paper Mario fanbase every time a new game drops. And before we move on, I just want a quick talk on backtracking, something I should absolutely talk about more. Ruby and Sapphire have a few issues in this regard, and all of these will include backtracking from Meteor Falls, getting to the 5th gym, or most importantly, going both to and from the Slateport shipyard. Am I being petty for having to walk the entire way? You're damn right I am. Awesome, that's it for the region itself, so let's get on to the replayability factor. Yep, time for arguably the most important part of any Pokemon game. And to open on our replayability discussion is the one thing Pokemon fans love complaining about. No, not the trees, silly, the Pokemon themselves. With a Pokedex count of a solid 200, you'd wonder how problematic some assets could be. So first, we pretend 3 of these don't exist due to post-game exclusivity. Pay them no mind, like how we pretend the awful Pokemon mobile game never happened. So we have our count of 197. But quantity doesn't matter. How's the quality of the Pokedex? Honestly, it's surprisingly good, because out of the 17 typings in these games, there's only issues with 2 of the typings in general. First is the Ice type. So remember how Diamond and Pearl only had 2 Ice and Fire types throughout the entire game, and made boss battles out of both of them? Well, bad news. Ice, just like those games would later do, gave us only 2 fully evolved Ice types and thought it was okay to make an Elite 4 member that uses the typing. But don't worry, I'll clown on that team later. And for the record, this is disregarding a legendary. Trainer Pokemon typically don't have legendaries anyway, so this is why there's an exception here. But for now, just know that this actively discourages even the thought of Ice types appearing at all, which is bad for variety. And that's not just their location in the game speaking. But moving on to the most bloated typing in Pokemon history, Water. Ah yes, Water. Not to sound like a broken record, but again, to compare it to Diamond and Pearl, in that game, we saw 17 fully evolved Water types, and I thought that was absurd. However, Ruby and Sapphire make this look like chump change with their 23 fully evolved Water types. Add all the evolutions to the mix, and it's 46 Pokemon. But that's not even all, because that's just 23% of the game's entire Pokédex. And at this point, I would try lying to you and say that it's not a problem. But then you'd have to account for the simple fact that water happens to be one of the most dominant types in the entire series, made worse by both the absolute most insane starter Pokemon to ever grace a playthrough of a game, and a legendary Pokemon that makes that Pokemon look like nothing in comparison. This is Gen 3 Surf as well, by the way, so a busted move to spam in doubles with no drawbacks. Listen, I typically never go into this depth with why a specific type is completely bonkers, but that's how you know that this is an issue. Okay, finally moving away from the Pokédex, let's speak on the gyms and the game's pacing. Overall, the game's level curve and overall pacing is surprisingly good. Yep, all until the evil team hideout is done, and then you can surf out into the abyss. Yes, this is what I was hinting about back in Black and White too, because here we see an outrageous example of fighting low level 30s, and then going into a sea of hardly any optional trainers, and then right into a gym whose gym leaders pack 2 level 42s in a double battle. Like, how is this jump justified? Well, it could be worse. Pokemon Yellow is right there. But then there was Gym 8's level jump from Gym 7, being an absolute grim 1 level increase. Oh yeah, the champ has a level 58 by the way. Nothing like a 15 level jump on top of this pitiful late game. Crazy how the game managed to have a pretty strong early game and mid game, just to fall to ruin all at once. This is an issue that a good EXP system could have fixed. But no, it's time for your grind against the 7th gym, and you can fight some pitifully low level wild Pokemon out in the seas. We'll go more in depth with the old EXP system in the Emerald video, just wait. Regarding other strong trainers in the game, the final rival fight is not only optional, but it doesn't even feature a fully evolved starter, which is kinda cringe. Watson's lack of any Gen 3 electric types is embarrassing. Glacia having 2 of the same unevolved Pokemon is just sad, but there really should never have been an Ice-type Elite 4 member granted the Pokédex working against it. And Drake has a pointless unevolved Pokemon when something like Altaria or Kingdra would have rounded out the team perfectly. I just don't get it, man. But overall, the game's replayability is pretty good with some minor annoyances in the late game. The best part is, it's not a deal breaker like with Pokemon Yellow, but hot damn does it get in the way despite everything else working in the game's favor. And yeah, for the most part, the Pokédex is pretty fine. But you know what's not fine? Not being subscribed. Ladies and gentlemen, big change is coming. Tournament 117 will be coming to an end soon, and evolving into something better. And that identity change may come at the cost of you potentially never seeing this channel ever again. Is that a fear? Is the Pokemon Emerald video that valuable to you? Hit the big red button below and save yourself from gambling that opportunity away, or something. I don't know. Change is coming. Nice, so now you've beaten the game. How is the post-game content? Well, it's super lacking. You'll be done with it faster than you'll be done with this video. Really, you'll be done with this post-game after 30 minutes at most, and you'd be lying to yourself if you claim it's a higher number. Because the post-game only adds 4 pieces of content absent from the main game. First is a version-exclusive roaming Pokemon, one of the worst features in the series, backed by a lack of decent ways to track the damn thing. Following that is 2 areas of play space. The boat that not a single person remembers or cares about, or Sky Pillar, which actually makes great use of the Mach Bike, which serves as a pretty fun skill check. And finally is the return of the Battle Tower. Dude, it's the same thing I've talked about more times than I would like to at this point. But guess what? This is actually the worst iteration of the Battle Tower yet. Only 2 level options, neither of which have level scaling, which essentially makes it unplayable upon beating the game unless you like getting ruined by Pokemon 40 levels above yours. Now congratulations, you finally tried all the post-game content and gave up almost immediately because it's such a massive letdown. So you decide to invest your time into the side content, as the overall quality of that is significantly better. First to note is the Game Corner's return. The returning slot machines are nice, but the simple fact they added another game is pretty neat despite it being less than stellar. But most importantly, you can still buy the coins for the TMs, which is awesome. Another returning mainstay is the Safari Zone. Other than notably being designed around the new bikes, for some absolutely unknown reason, you have to get the Pokeblock case to even enter the Safari Zone. Yeah, it's dumb, which moves us on to the topic of Pokeblocks, which exists for 2 reasons: using berries outside of battle and using them for contest stats. They're obtained by doing this mini game where you just press the A button. Truly the next step in human evolution. Sadly, the Pokeblocks are required to get melodic, so good luck. Doesn't help that Feebas is stuck to 6 random tiles on a very specific route just to be obnoxious. The next change sucks so damn much. Who on God's green earth thought it was okay to take fishing, which was perfectly functional for 4 games at this point, and thought we needed a lot more randomness and time wasting? On a more positive note, these games invested in 2 bikes for the player. Now, it's worth mentioning that you're not able to have both of them. The Mach bike exists for speed, going up slopes and getting over these neat floor traps, while the Acro bike exists for navigating these weird bars and whatever these are, and sitting in one spot not to burn repels, although Sweet Sense is better for that niche. All around, both provide advantages and are fun to use. Next is the Trick House. It's a wacky building on Route 110 with multiple puzzles that you can get to play more of as you proceed through the game. It's cool, I guess. After all, its addition only improves the game. Next is a fun manner to express yourself, being the secret bases. Accessible via the Secret Power TM, you can make a home in a tree, a bush, or a cave and decorate it to your heart's content. Or, decorating your actual room, because you can do that too. Next is the Pokénav. This replaces the Pokégear from the Johto games, removing the flaws of that system entirely. It has the map, you can see the trainers that can currently be rebattled, you can check contest stats, we'll get there, and checking every single ribbon you may be insane enough to collect on a Pokemon. Those first 2 are self-explanatory, but ribbons need a minor explanation, essentially being a trackable achievement for each individual Pokemon, with a larger list expanding throughout all the games. Which leads us to our final feature. I really don't want to talk about contests. Seriously, what is the point? Am I here just to suffer? Okay, fine. Deep breaths. Start on 3. 1, 2, 3. Which is contest? So, first, there is entering a contest. 4 ranks and 4 buildings scattered across Hoenn, so it's a little inconvenient to play every rank back to back. But when you actively sign up, there's 5 different contest categories as well, so a lot of commitment will need to be made in the setup of your Pokemon in advance, in terms of movesets and the contest stats. Now, a contest is broken into 2 parts. The visual thing with the Pokeblocks, all in order to score points before the actual skill check arrives. That being part 2, which is the battle showcase thing, where you use attacks in an effort to get as many points as possible while denying the opponent as many points as possible. Luckily for you, the meta involves you being the worst person of all time and ruining everyone else's day. Also, berries can be grown in water now. How awesome! But ladies and gentlemen, we are done with the features. So now that means we can finally move towards the revolutionary changes brought to the actual gameplay. Finally, the fun stuff I can overanalyze and praise to hell and back, the game mechanic improvements. Up first is Pokemon specifically with the addition of abilities. A revolutionary addition granting every single Pokemon extra depth to their performance and completely redefining the identity of some. Every Pokemon has 1 ability. Some Pokemon can have a selection between 1 or 2. Others are just stuck with 1. The list is huge, so I'll keep these brief. But fun highlights include an attack drop on switch-in, abilities preventing Pokemon from switching out, extra damage for a specific type at low enough HP, causing status conditions from contact attacks, a free immunity because why not? That's fair. Broken ability 1, broken ability 2, surprise, another broken ability. And here we see a cruel joke. Status immunities and whatever this is. With many other fun abilities that could double the length of this video if I just kept babbling on about it. So let's move towards the other overhaul of the Pokemon received, the change to the IV and EV systems. The IV system change is easier to explain since instead of being limited to a cap of 15 for extra stats determined when a Pokemon is encountered, that cap is now 31. A pointless change as now each IV is worth a single stat point at level 100 instead of 2. Congrats, this is worse. Other than the fact that shiny Pokemon are no longer tied to this value, which is a small good change. Now, the EV system on the other hand received a much needed rework. So back in generations 1 and 2, the EV system those games had allowed all Pokemon to reach the stat cap for every single stat, which in theory a max invested Pokemon would be fast, pretty bulky, and pretty strong with next to no drawbacks. Now this EV system copied its notes and changed it up a little bit to not look the same, and it turned out far better, because now there's a cap that you cannot go past, being 510, and considering the cap before Sun and Moon was 255 on each stat, meant the generic optimization would only allow you to have 2 capped stats with 1 extra stat point elsewhere or not at all, meaning the meta with Pokemon with all 6 stats capped is no more, leaving us with up to only 2 stats max, which is far better and allows for more customization and optimization of a Pokemon stat spread, leading to defensive Pokemon not being as strong and offensive Pokemon not being as bulky. But overall, this change is amazing, and while most of those reasons were stated here, we'll probably retread this conversation at some point in the Generation 2 videos, because the context there is important as well, mainly because of the competitive scene, but we'll get there when we get there. Now, speaking of Pokemon being unique in modified stats, we go to Natures. This is another trait for a Pokemon determined when encountered. This trait will modify either 2 of a Pokemon's stats by 10%, 1 positive and 1 negative, or it won't affect the stats at all. The nature determined comes down to a 1 in 25 chance, with 5 of those chances being able to affect nothing at all, and HP will never be altered in this manner. It is just another neat addition to make all the Pokemon unique, while allowing for some fun min-maxing. Similar to Ivy's, natures cannot be changed, at least for now. They also affect contest stats, but you don't care about that. How about something new? Double battles. 2 Pokemon at once, in a surprisingly fair and fun battle format. And this is from an era where a fainted Pokemon would come in immediately instead of after the turn ending. Good addition, and its inclusion in this game is unique amongst the same feature in later titles. Since we're on the topic of Pokemon, let's talk about the other phenomenal change, the PC system, but specifically the box system, as it got overhauled to finally not be a hassle. Remember, the old system was a mess. It was slow. In Generation 1's case, you could lose Pokemon that you were catching, or in Generation 2's case, a faster mechanic that requires you to save the game every single time you try to move something. It was bad, but thankfully we were given our more modern box system, with 30 Pokemon in each box this time, and hot damn, these menus are good. While it's simple and fast enough, it works. Plus, having actual Pokemon sprites instead of generic sprites makes it actually easier to determine which Pokemon is what, which is nice. Regardless, let's move away from Pokemon and look at this beauty, running. It's a shame it took this long to happen. Awesome. Now, while I could continue about other changes that are significantly less notable, highly doubt anyone wants to hear me drone on about how stacking 3 layers of spikes is the most revolutionary change of the whole series, but I digress for now. Although I do have one final thing to mention. Pokemon Transfer, a staple of all Pokemon games, sadly does not exist in these games, or its Generation 3 brethren. Yep, sadly there is no way to move Pokemon up from the first or second generations of games to this one, which sucks because that essentially means those Pokemon were all trapped, gone, or dare may I say, ended. Alright, let's just keep this section short and simple. The graphics and music of Pokémon Ruby and Sapphire are strong. Looking towards the graphics, they're timeless. Can't say anything bad about them, they've aged pretty well. But for something new, the battle scene is pretty neat because the battle terrain, or whatever the Pokémon are standing on, actually matches the location in which the battles are taking place. So more immersion in an area which used to be completely devoid of any form of immersion. Now, the music on the other hand is above the average that Pokémon typically provides. More battle music across the board, as the evil team bosses and legendary Pokemon actually have music that matches the intensity of the moment. The fact it took this long to reach this point is beyond me, but cool, whatever, let's get on to the story already. Thankfully, we are talking about a Pokemon game here, but these games do have more meat in this department than the games prior, but it's still hardly enough to bat an eye towards, but we still have to mention it. But at least these games open up more differently than most do, as you begin by moving to a brand new house, before saving that absolute joke of a professor from a wild Pokemon by using a Pokemon that you stole from his briefcase, before bullying his child, and finally being tasked to complete the Pokedex before seeing your trainer have a father for the first time in this entire series. Then you get to help this absolutely tragic child catch his first Pokemon, before immediately forgetting about him for the entire game and doing the gym challenge. Hell yeah! Now, this is where we get to what I would argue is the worst part of the game, even worse than the level curve, the evil teams. So in these games, we have 2 evil teams, one bad team, and the other which does nothing. It depends on the game being played, and that right there is the problem. Both evil teams are equally insignificant in terms of the canon, because they are just interchangeable, as both their plans go down the exact same, doing cringe stuff, stealing again, all of which to revive a legendary Pokemon to either, in the case of Team Magma, use the sun for more landmass, or with Team Aqua, using the rain to expand the seafloor. Seems like somebody doesn't understand how weather works. Regardless, the legendaries release and the apocalypse begins and ends in nearly 10 minutes, because for some reason the bad guy had the wrong orb, but you had the right one. Ah yes, just a happy little coincidence. But regardless, you save the day, and moments before reaching the end, get a final battle against that kid from the beginning of the game, and then walloping the Elite Four and becoming the champion. Oh yeah, and the champion explores the region, I guess, but the main rival is such a letdown. Here's the thing, the rival's just not interesting, there's no character arc, there's nothing to have you invested. There is nothing to this character. But at the end of the day, the story is kinda bad in the grand scheme of gaming. But as for Pokemon, well, it essentially allows the end of the world to be in the discussion, so the stakes have never been higher. In the end, Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire are pretty strong among the series. finally birthing the more adventurous side of the series with the slightest resemblance of a more climactic story. Even seeing some great gameplay features birthed or modified here to set the series up for a small trend of games that only got better with time. Which now begs the question of, did nostalgia save Pokémon Ruby and Sapphire? And I gotta say no. Although I can say they don't get enough criticism in areas that they should. But of course, these games do manage to stay on their own 2 feet with hardly any outrageous issues. And yes, I can see why these games would be the best in the series at the time of release, with its fate doomed by the 2 games to follow it. Now, while I always look at these games in the modern day and grade them on modern standards, these games still hold up pretty damn well. Although I wish I could say they're better than the remakes, but that's only the case when it comes to the art style and how Mega Evolution negatively impacted those games. But that's a different discussion entirely, which means I will retract the misinformation I put out last year. Although that begs the question on a score, and I'll say it's maybe a 4.8-ish. Yeah, I just want to walk away from the system in general. Everything about it screams not thought out enough. Although what is thought out enough is the fact that you should maybe consider playing these games. And it's a maybe exclusively due to Emerald and the remakes existing, with next month's topic being the larger reason. Well, ladies and gentlemen, going forward, the should you playlist is going to be the norm over the scuffed scored one. And to continue on from last month's video, I did think 3 Hopes was pretty good. And with that said, next time I will be seeing you under a new alias and a new beginning, which only means one thing remains. Thank you for watching, and I will see you guys for the first time.